Hello and welcome to the Camarillo Church of the Nazarene, affectionately called CamNaz. I am one of the pastors here. My name is Pastor James, and I am so glad that you have tuned in to one of our weekly services. We hope that our weekly service inspires you to take your next spiritual step. If you don't know what your next spiritual step is, but you know you need to take one, or if you need help taking your next spiritual step, I would invite you to pull out your phone and text the word CamNaz, CAMNAZ, to the phone number 24587. That's CamNaz to 24587, and we're going to send you all kinds of information to help you take your next spiritual step. If you want information about all the things going on at CamNaz, go to our website, camnaz.org. It's the best place to know what's going on. Before we get started in our weekly service, I want to invite you to do one more thing. And that's invite your friends to church. The easiest way that you can do that is by hitting the share button right now and invite your friends to join you for this weekly service. That's it. Here it is. We're so glad that you've joined us for our CamNaz weekly service.
Dove Men Plus Care. Care makes a man stronger. Share how care makes you stronger with #RealStrength.
Okay, so I loved that video the first time that I saw it, and then it came on at the end and said Dove's Men's Body Care, and I was like, what? What in the world is this? That makes no sense to the rest of the video. So apparently I've been doing it wrong. As a good dad, I need to use Dove Men's Real Body. If I don't, then I'm just not caring enough, I guess. But the first part of the video was awesome. So welcome, everyone, to Camarillo Church of the Nazarene. Those that are joining us online, those that are here, we want to say Happy Father's Day to you, and we just invite you to join us in worship today.
And won't you stand with us as we sing this morning? Shall rise to thee.
You will You are worthy of it all. You are worthy of it all. For from you are all things, and to you are all things. You deserve the glory. You are worthy of it all. You are worthy of it all. For from you are all things, and to you are all things. You deserve the glory.
You hold the reins on the sun and moon, like horses driven by kings. You cover the mountains, the valleys below, with the breath of your mighty wings. All treasures of wisdom and things to be known are hidden inside your hand. And in this fortunate turn of events, you've asked me to be your friend. Asked me to be your friend. Hey, you are my first, you are my last, you are my future and my past. Hey, you are my first, you are my last, you are my future and my past. The constellations are swimming inside the breath of your desire. Where could I run, or where could I hide from your heart's jealous fire? All treasures of wisdom and things to be known are hidden inside your hand. And in this fortunate turn of events, you've asked me to be your friend. Asked me to be your friend. Hey, you are my first, you are my last, you are my future and my past. pearls of wisdom and things to be known, hidden inside your hand. And in this fortunate turn of events, you've asked me to be your friend.
So today, whether you've walked in or you've logged in, I just want to let you know that whatever you came here with, you don't have to leave here with. And I just want to invite you to bring whatever on your heart to God and let Him touch that. And you can come to the altar if you want, or you can post your prayer requests in the chat, or whether you're here or online, text the word pray to 24587, and you can submit a little form with your prayer request, and we will pray for you, and you can select what kind of level of privacy you want with that. Whatever it is, however you do it, we just invite you to come to God in prayer, and He's the God that can change your past into an incredible future, and He can alleviate whatever's wrong, and He can bring about good from any evil. So let's go to God in prayer.
All my days I've been held in your hands. From the moment that I wake up until I lay my head, I will sing of the goodness of God. All my life you have been faithful, and all my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, oh, I will sing of the goodness of God. I love your voice. You have led me through the fire in darkest night. You are close like no other. I've known you as a father. I've known you as a friend, and I have lived in the goodness of God. And all my life you have been faithful, and all my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, oh, I will sing of the goodness of God. All my life. And all my life you have been faithful. And all my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am the goodness of God. the goodness of God. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. With my life laid down, I surrendered now. I give you everything. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. And all my life you have been faithful. And all my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, oh, I will sing of the goodness of God. All my life. And all my life you have been faithful. All my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, oh, I will sing of the goodness of God. Oh, I will sing of the goodness of God. I'm gonna sing of the goodness of God.
Come before you and we praise you and we declare your goodness. And God, I just lift up my friends to you. I pray for those that are here. I pray for those that are watching with us online. I pray for all the needs that have been lifted before you. And I pray that you would come, and I pray that you would touch them in a way that only you could. God, we lift up to you just the world that we're living in. We just pray that your grace, your peace, your wisdom would come and settle upon us. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Amen. Well, welcome again. My name is Pastor James. I'm the lead pastor here. Thank you to the worship team for leading us and all the volunteers that are helping us today. You may be wondering where Pastor Justin is, and he took some vacation. And, some industries in COVID-19 just stopped. And I felt like the church ministry, I've just been more busy than I've ever been in this season. And I'm glad that he's able to get away and get a break and be with his dad for the Father's Day. That doesn't always happen when you're in ministry. So I'm glad that he gets to do that. So Pastor Justin and Mr. Pierce, glad that you guys are together today. And to all the fathers, happy Father's Day. A Merry Father's Day to you. We have chocolates for you. They're all pre-wrapped, and they were bought before COVID-19, so you don't have to worry about that. And moms, you kind of got ripped off, at least church-wise. You were all watching online. You didn't get anything, so we have a chocolate bar for you too. So happy belated Mother's Day to all of you. Online, you have my permission. Go into the kitchen, find something chocolate, and eat it. It's the calories will not count today, in Jesus' name. We've been in this series, Great Questions, and I really wanted to maybe do one or two more days in that series, and I just felt like God could not let me go any further, and I wanted to pivot gears. And if you're like us, the family table is a place where you have all kinds of interesting conversations, some that are meaningful, some that are like ridiculous, some that are important, some that are unimportant. But it's the family coming together and just sharing, what's on our hearts. And I really thought, man, what a great context for us to be able to come together and have this conversation. If you know me, you know that many times, whatever's happening in the world, I don't often bring to the pulpit. I preach whatever is first and foremost whatever God tells me to. But second of all, I just feel like as God calls us to be the best that we can be, that is what changes us and allows us to address what's happening in culture. Today, though, a very rare moment, I really just felt like God could not let me not talk about what's going on. And so today's message is going to be a little different. There are going to be scriptures that we're going to find in the conversation, but it's going to be a little different than me just preaching on a text and then just extrapolating information from that. But I think it's important that we come together, we have this conversation. Specifically, what we're going to be talking about today is going to be racism. And I just want to let you know a little bit about my experience this week. The last 2 weeks, I've just been broken. And it's really been by conversation. I have a conversation, I listen, and then I weep, and then I listen, and then I learn, and then I weep, and then it's just this cycle of just being broken before God about what's going on, and then trying to learn and listen, and then trying to say, okay, now what can I learn from this? And I think in all of that, God has really pushed me to a place where I know that something needs to change. And I hear that. In fact, a lot of people that I have been listening to have been saying that where we're at right now feels different, that this is a tipping point, which, I don't know, maybe a month ago, I started a book called Tipping Point, just out of, it was on my to-do, my read list, and this definitely feels very different. And I wanted to share with you my process, too. Today, whether you're here or whether you're watching, it's probable that you're going to get offended because I got offended. As I was listening to other people and their ideas and where they were coming from, there were times where people said things that I didn't agree with, and I'm going to say things this morning that you're not going to agree with. And I got offended, but I had to push past that offense. And if you're, number one, if you're conservative, you're going to get offended. If you're liberal, you're going to get offended. If you're independent or a libertarian, you're going to get offended. But we can't stay in offense. And listen, in the top 5 reads at CamNaz, one of them has got to be The Bait of Satan. And that is John Bevere's this incredible book where he says offense is the bait of Satan. If we get offended, Satan will use that feeling to push us into bitterness, into anger, into selfishness. And we've got to be able to push past that and realize as followers of Jesus, we don't have the right to be offended. So I just want to challenge you in this conversation. If I say something that doesn't agree with you, that's probably a good thing. Don't get offended, move past it, and try to hear what I'm saying or what I'm saying other people are saying. And the process has to be in the midst of all things that we're saying, that we keep our love on, that we continue to love each other. And I had to keep the conversation going. Most of my conversations happen online, obviously. I was listening to people talk, and I had to choose to not turn it off. I had to choose, like, you know what, I don't agree with that, but I'm going to keep listening. And listening isn't, I'm going to let you keep talking. Listening is, I'm going to continue to try to understand what it is that you're saying. And so we need to keep our love on. We need to listen, and then we need to be able to learn and say, what, if anything, can I hear from this conversation and pull into my narrative or my mindset? And my hope as a church is that we can talk like no one else is talking. Our culture today is screaming at each other, right? We see that. They're angry, they're yelling, and no one is talking. And the second thing was, like, can we listen like no one else? Because no one's listening. People are pausing, but no one, like, while other person's talking, but there's not listening. It's not, what are you trying to say, and why are you trying to say that? We've got to listen like no one else. I saw a video, and it was of 2 Karens, right? You know what a Karen is? If you don't, I'll give you a little insight. I think it was probably the millennial generation, maybe Gen Z, that, like, named Karen as the angry person that's just like in your face, complaining, yelling about whatever. So if your name's Karen, I apologize, but it's not me. I didn't call it that. It's these two ladies that are just, they're yelling at each other. They have differing views. They're screaming at each other, and they're not listening. Like, they're saying almost the same thing, but they're just yelling at each other. So can we listen like no one else? Can we act like no one else? Can we take what we're listening and allow that to change our behavior? And here's my hope is, like, I don't want to change your viewpoint today. God is the person who guides our hearts, our minds, our lives. My hope is that you would go to God with this, and I would hope that you would allow yourself to go further in listening to other people. In fact, I have some resources that I can share with you that you can listen to some of the same things that I've been listening at, and I would hope that you would allow God to be able to pull out of those conversations things to be able to change your mindset and our behavior. And the last one is, can we love like no one else? Because if we're not acting in love, then it's all worthless, right? I mean, that's what it says in 1 Corinthians. Like, we can have a great message and be out in the streets, like, yelling it into a bullhorn. But if there's not love behind it, we're just making noise. It's like a clanging gong is what Paul says. So I want to say this too, because the issue that we're going to talk about today, racism, is so complex. The issue of, like, what's happening with the rioting is also really complicated. And I thought about, like, well, can I make some blanket statements about it? It's just all complicated. So if you're listening, like, well, what does he have to think about the riots? Just, like, put that on hold, because I don't think I have time to even get into that. I mean, it's like the one blanket statement that we could all say and agree on is, like, we want to value people's lives. And, like, being violent towards people is not an answer. We don't want to do that. But that whole issue just needs more time. And if you think it's not complicated, then I would suggest to you that maybe you don't understand the whole picture. And I would just challenge you to be willing to listen, right? And be willing to change your mind. If you're not willing to change your mind, then you're not really listening. You're just letting someone say something you disagree with. So if you're don't anticipate me talking about, like, all the riots. I have got to separate that issue from what we're talking about. I want to give you two things. Top 5 things that you need to know about the current racial conversation, and then top 5 things that you can do about it right now. So I thought that would be helpful for you, for us. First thing I want to say is what happened to George Floyd was tragic, and it was triggering. I think everybody agrees about this, right? I think we all agree, like, what happened was tragic, it was sad, it was horrific, it was wrong. I mean, even people that are bringing into the conversation different ideas, they're all agreeing, like, what happened to him was just wrong. And we all see that. Like, my first exposure to this, my son comes up, he shows me a meme with George Floyd, Colin Kaepernick, and my first thought was, who is that, what's happening, and what did he do? It was several questions later that I began to ask the question about race, like, that I noticed, okay, that's a black man, that's a white cop, there could be something racial going on here. The thing that I think most of us miss is that for a lot of people, their first thought when they saw the picture was not what's happening. It was, this is a racial moment, right? It triggered people. And T.D. Jakes gave a great conversation. T.D. Jakes and Ray Johnston had this conversation together. They filmed this conversation. T.D. Jakes was on his way to interview a bunch of all the police in his hometown to get their perspective. What's going on? How do you process this? What about the fraternity of brotherhood, of badges that create, what kind of culture is created? So in that, though, he also shared that for many black people, they have negative experiences with law enforcement. And I want to say too, like, I am not presuming to speak for all black people, and like black people are not a group of people that all have the same experiences or think the same, or right, they're not like some magical monolith that all have the same thoughts. But as I began to listen to T.D. Jakes, and as I listened to so many people just share their stories that they've had, they've said this, that when you see an image like that and you have a negative experience with the police, your experience, your past informs your present. Like, you see something, and if you've ever been bullied by the police because of your skin color, you're going to see that photo very differently than someone who hasn't. I remember I was 16. I was driving home from working at Blockbuster, and I was driving home, and I was new at driving, so I was like really focused on going the speed limit. And this car was coming up the highway. It was like this 5-lane highway up in Washington, and it was like kind of late at night. There was only one car, so I'm watching my speedometer really closely, and I get close to this intersection, which is all green, right? And I'm like still new, so I'm like, when is it going to turn yellow? Like, remember when you're first driving, you were kind of anxious about like passing a car for the first time and going through intersections for the first time. I see this car. It pulls into the turn lane opposite to me, and as we pass, I notice that it's a police officer, and so I like look down at my speedometer again, and I'm just like paranoid about going 55. So then he hooks a U and he follows me, and we go down this hill, and then he pulls me over. And my experience is, my brother were retired. He was a cop at the time. So I have a very like friendly view of law enforcement. And he comes up and he says, "You know why I pulled you over?" And I said, "No, officer." And I handed him my license and registration. He said, "You were speeding." And I said, I'm sorry, I thought I was going 55. And he said, "No, you weren't. I clocked you, and you were coming down the first hill. You were going 62. You passed me. I turned around and followed you. I clocked you again. You were going 62. You were going 62 when I put my lights on." And I said, I'm sorry, my speedometer said 55. And he said, "You're going 62. And then he wrote me a ticket. And I was just like, okay, thank you. And I took the ticket. I signed the thing. And it was years after that. Every time a cop got behind me or I got anywhere near a cop, I got paranoid about my speed limit, because I was like, I don't want to get pulled over, because I don't know what it is about my car and their radar gun. And I have gotten more than one speeding ticket that was not accurate. And I can't imagine, like, I felt totally safe, right? I felt like, man, this is dumb. I got wronged out of this whole scenario, but I never felt threatened. And like, if you can imagine feeling threatened for your life, that adds a whole nother level of being around. And I think that for people that have experienced that, that's what they see when they see George Floyd. They don't see an event and they're wondering what happened. They see their past and they're thinking, this is really painful. And honestly, it's traumatic, right? It's traumatic. It was traumatic for me when Ryan showed me the video, the long video, because I said, what is that? So he shows me the long video, not the short video. I couldn't watch it. Like, I tried to watch it. It was like watching Schindler's List, you know? Like, I knew I needed to watch it, and I kept trying to watch it, but like, it just got to a point where I'm like, turn it off. I can't watch this anymore. It's traumatizing. And I think that in some ways, it's a little bit like a marriage, right? Like, how many of you had the experience where, like, the woman comes home and she says, I have a problem, and she shares the problem with the husband, and the husband says, okay, I can fix this. Let's fix it. And the woman says, I don't need you to fix it. I just, like, I'm frustrated, or I'm sad, or I'm mad, or I'm whatever. I need you to listen. And I think that's what's occurring is like our black brothers and sisters are saying like, I'm hurting, but like we're coming to the point of like, well, what's happened? Let's figure it out and let's fix it. And I think that one of the things that I've often heard is like create space for us to sit in pain for a little bit before we try to fix the problem. So I don't know if that helps you, but for many people, like there's a different viewpoint when people watch that video. Fourth thing is that racism is real, and I think this is a really challenging question, right? As I like sat and I listened to just different people share their story, and it wasn't like, I don't believe racism is real. Have you ever had that? And we're like, we're making them be defensive. Like, you better tell me what it is just to prove it's real. That's very different than saying like, hey, if you want to share, I want to listen. And it's shock. I was so, like my heart hurt when I heard people share their experiences, like people my age. And it was painful. It was painful to listen to. Last Tuesday in our small group Bible study, I just put the Bible study on hold, and I said, if you've ever experienced like discrimination, whether it's race or gender, I just want to give you an opportunity to share. And I was so shocked at people in our church that opened up and just said, this is my story. And like this stuff happens, it's real, right? And I'm a little bit unusual. Most people that I know that are my age and my color of skin don't have an experience with racism, or at least they haven't shared with me that experience. And as I've just been processing this topic, three stories came to my mind where I've experienced racism, and I want to share one of those because I think it might be helpful. I was in Colorado. I was on an event. I got dropped off of a bus, a tour bus. I was at a nice part of town. Like everything was clean. There was no graffiti, litter, like any of the indicators that I was in a bad section of town. And all of a sudden a truck pulled up with men. And I won't say what ethnicity they were because I don't want to prejudice anybody that's listening. But these men began to yell racial slurs at me, some that like I recognized as making sense, some that didn't. They pulled out weapons, they threatened my life, and they chased me, and I ran for my life until I found my group. And when I got to my group, like we were all supposed to get lunch, and I remember like I just didn't feel hungry, right? And I was like, I just like was kind of in shock of what happened. Like when it first happened, I remember they started yelling at me. I looked around like, who are these guys yelling at? And when I realized it was me, I was like, wow, this is happening. Wow, whoa, this is what that feels like. And then when the bat and the gun came out, that was like a whole nother experience. And I remember I got a frozen custard because I didn't know what else to get. I never had that. And I went on the bus and I sat there. I didn't need it. I just sat there. And we started driving. And I didn't tell anybody. Like, that didn't even like register in my head like, hey, you should tell somebody about this. I remember thinking like, I'm so glad I'm leaving this town. I can't imagine not being able to leave the town. Like being stuck in that town, living in that town, having to face those men in that truck every single day as like part of my life. And like racism is real because humanity is real and sin is real. And as long as like sin is in the hearts of men and women, there's going to be problems like racism in the world. And I think the next point is also important, is that we can sympathize with people, we can try to understand with people, but a lot of us can't empathize. Like we don't know what that's like, you know? Like I know what it's like to run for my life in that scenario, but I don't know what it's like to be black. I don't know what it's like to be Latino. I don't know what it's like to be Asian, and I can't ever know. I know what it's like to be put into a culture where the primary culture is not my culture. I was younger, I got to like vacation, but that is a way different experience than living in that culture of, when you're vacationing, you're like, usually in like the nice place of town, and your money is your protection, right? You're like buying stuff, and people, they're like dependent on tourism, so they're trying to be nice to you. Like even when they're mean to you, they're nice to you. When I was a little kid, I was in Jamaica. I was like, I don't know, Lacey's age, and this guy walks over, the shop owner, and he was like, hey, pull this thing, man. And I like walked over, it was like a little slot machine, and I pulled it, and it like shot all this water at my face, and I was like, like that. And then everybody laughs, and he's like, hey, you should buy this and show it to your friends. And like, even him being mean was really nice, I think we need to stop and realize, like, I can try to understand, but in many ways I can't understand. And the second thing is, I just wanted to unpack the matter with all the lives matter phrases, because I think this is really confusing, and I hope I can do this justice. I'll start with all lives matter. The problem with all lives matter, Craig Groeschel, Pastor Craig Groeschel, the guy who made your YouVersion Bible app, said it really well. He said, when your kid's hurting and they like did really bad at their swim meet or whatever, and you go into the room, you don't look at them and say, hey, I just want to let you know all my kids really matter to me. No, you say, you matter to me, right? Because that's what they need to hear. And obviously the goal is for all lives to matter, right? We all get that. Like, racism won't be eradicated until all lives matter. The problem is, I think that when we say that phrase, what we don't realize is it's being interpreted as being insensitive. Like, I need to know that I matter, right? I've been screaming for so long that I feel like I don't matter. And now when I need you to tell me I matter, all you tell me is that everybody matters. And so if you're saying the phrase, you just need to know, like, how someone may be hearing that. And if you're hearing the phrase, you need to know that the heart behind that phrase is not to, like, isolate you or be insensitive to you. They're trying to state, like, the goal of, like, yeah, it's not just you that matters. I want everybody to matter. So I feel like that phrase is a problem. Right? When our words don't reflect what our heart is saying, then we've got to find better words to say what we're trying to say. The problem with Black Lives Matter, people that struggle with saying Black Lives Matter do not struggle with the phrase or the content. Most people that don't want to say that don't want to say it because they believe that Black lives don't matter. It's because they have a problem with the organization that's called Black Lives Matter. And if you're not aware of that, there is a popular phrase, Black Lives Matter, and then there's an organization, a nonprofit organization that has a bunch of different values that they stand for. And the problem is that organization, and this, honestly, this makes me like really upset. This organization has a beautiful opportunity to say, you know what? There's this phrase that I think the whole nation wants to say. I think everybody wants to say it, but instead of just making it about equality, they've said we want to be pro-abortion, we want to be pro-LGBTQ, we are anti-capitalist, we are pro-communist, and like 6 other statements. And so when people have a reservation about saying the phrase, it's not because they don't believe that Black Lives Matter. It's because I don't want to give authority to these other issues. And I don't think anybody in Black Lives Matter, the organization, is listening. But I just think you have a beautiful opportunity, instead of trying to go after all those things, of just saying, let's just make Black Lives Matter about Black lives. And it's coming across to people that are struggling with that phrase as like selfish and greedy, and you're trying to get all these things your way. And I just wish that we would stop and just realize, like, let's just be simplistic here. And I think that if you would just take out all the other values, you would knock down a whole bunch of barriers for people to just say, yeah, I can get behind that. The important thing is that we communicate like you matter. And I've seen cases where like a white stranger walks up to a black stranger and says, Black Lives Matter, and it still comes across wrong. And I think that's because it's still sending the wrong message. The message that needs to get communicated is, hi, my name is James, what's your name? Shake the hand. I just want you to know you matter, right? That's what we're trying to communicate. You matter to me. I see you. You have value. I hear you, right? It's not, I'm supporting your cause, because you don't know where they're at, what they're thinking, who they are, what their experiences are. The goal is to personalize and to value life. Okay, the last thing. You might be wondering, like, man, why is all this happening, right? Like, it's not just COVID-19 and George Floyd. It just feels like the last 10 years have been this tornado of change in our culture. And that's because, like, the cultural values in our nation are changing. And, like, I could spend a lot of time here unpacking this, but starting post-World War II, there began a gradual change from Judeo-Christian values to secular or humanistic values. And we are changing where we're getting our values from the Word of God to what's popular in our culture. And so now that we've said, well, we don't want to get what we value or, agree on as a people from a document. We want it to be whatever we want it to be as a populace. Now we're all trying to figure out, well, what do we all want it to be? What's the group want it to be? And that's why there's been, like, every issue in American culture, we've been like, okay, well, what's going on? There's like this really volatile conversation, and many Christians feel like they're losing power, and many non-Christians feel like we need to gain power. And I think that just understanding what's happening explains the volatility. And I also want to say that specifically to my brothers and sisters in Christ, I don't know how to say this politely, but we kind of had it coming, right? I mean, look at all the stuff that happened under our watch, value-wise. Some of the corrections that's happened the last 10 years have been really good changes, right? I mean, if you could have heard the stories on the Zoom meeting, the Bible study we had last Tuesday, the way that they talked about the culture of when what happened to them happened, they said, I had no voice in that moment. And these are people talking about not just racism, like gender, abuse, all kinds of things. And I want to say that, like, our past has some ugly spots in it, and we've got to, like, accept that. But I think we can also, like, honor the good parts of it too, right? Like, there's been a lot of really beautiful things that the church has done. And like, I think about the Civil War. I mean, that was 100,000 lives that it was mostly white Christian men that laid down their life because they believed in freeing slavery. And I just think, like, that needs to be part of our history. That needs to be acknowledged. And I'm not saying, like, that doesn't, like, deserve anything, or what. I'm not trying to, like, make an argument about that, about anything. But I'm just think that in our history, there's, like, some really beautiful stuff. It's not perfect. There's some really ugly stuff. And as believers, we've got to be able to look at the beautiful stuff and say, we need to be more like that, and look at the areas where we failed and say, we can't fail like that again. We can't let people down like that again. I hope that it all makes sense to you, of just, like, there is radical change coming, and it's not for no reason, right? I want to remind ourselves that our influence as believers into our culture is through bringing the gospel to an individual, right? You go find someone, you share the hope of Christ, the power of Christ. That is what's going to change a heart. That's going to change society. You change society an individual at a time. And the goal can't be an issue. It's got to be the person. Don't try to make someone think like you think. Introduce them to the person that changed the way that you think. That is going to bring power into the transformation. And I think that as believers, so often we've gotten maybe distracted in the message. Like we need to try to restore the way things were, or we want our power or influence into culture back. We don't want power and influence into the culture back. We want transformation into a person. And if that happens enough times, that is what changes the people around us. And that's going to be a better change. And I just want to point this out, that we have to allow the God of love to fully transform our hearts, right? The problem was we had too many believers that had said yes to Jesus as their Savior, but said no to him as their Lord. And so they allowed issues like racism or greed or, whatever to remain in their life. And God didn't touch that part of life, and that created an even larger problem. We need God to fully transform our life, and that's what creates a new mindset, and it's what creates new behaviors and new actions. And I want to add this too, that it's God gives us people and requires people to be a part of the transformative process. Like if you really want to change, you're going to need to find people that are fellow believers to help you change, people that can disciple you. And in this process, in this season for me, that's why the conversations that I've been listening to have been fellow preachers. Like all the people that don't look like me, act like they think like me, they're another like Christian preacher that I've said, I want to give you a platform into my life to tell me what I don't know that I don't know. I want to know what you know that I don't know, and I want you to tell me the parts of me that you see that I can't see. Help me bring part of the gospel that I can't see because I don't have your experience, so that I can fully know God, so that God can make the change in my life. Okay, so top 5 things that you can do about racism right now. Number 5, just listen. Like have conversations with people that don't act like you, look like you, or think like you. And listen. Like don't just allow them to speak, but listen. And even when you get offended and you're like, oh, I don't agree with that. Because they're going to say that, right? You're not going to find someone that you agree about on everything. And you might find people that give you like something really valuable, but you disagree with them about 80% of the other stuff. But it's worth listening to 80% that you don't agree with, so you can get that like one truth that is really like, wow, God really touched that and changed my life. I want to say this too about listening is listen to the emotion first and the content second. This is one of the rules of brave communication. One of the workshops that we did here at the church, just giving people tools on how to navigate conflict and communication better. And this is such an important one, especially for now. Like the emotion and the level at which people are talking is just as important in the communication as what they're actually saying. And sometimes you just need to like listen to the emotion and be like, I hear you, I hear that. And I hear that with the racial conversation, I hear that with the rioting, and I hear that with COVID-19. People are like, listen, we've been locked indoors. We were like all really like all this energy. We're all like tired, and we need to vent about something. And now we have like 3 issues to vent about. We're all just like, and like giving people the space to like, I hear that. I hear you. You know, sometimes you need to say it like a few times, like before they realize, okay, he's listening. Another great tool, I wasn't going to say this, but it's really good, is mirror listening. Like repeat what they say. Or like, I'm so angry, I just want to kill somebody right now. You're like, you're so angry that you just want to kill somebody right now. And oftentimes when you say something back to somebody that they hear what they said when they didn't hear it when they said it. And they say, well, no, I don't mean that, right? I'm not going to like actually kill someone. I'm just angry. And you're like, okay, you're just angry. Yeah. Like you repeating what they're saying can oftentimes change what they're thinking. And you're not saying anything different. You're just saying what they're saying. It's mirror listening or reflective listening. I forget the name of the tool, but that can really help too. And then the other thing, I think this is like so important. I think it was Stephen Covey, one of his 7 habits of highly effective people. Seek to understand before being understood. Even in the conversations that I was listening to the last couple of weeks, I would hear things where I would say, you're not hearing the problem there on the other side of it, right? And it's not like I'm stopping listening or whatever. I'm noticing that like this is a prevalent problem everywhere. People don't try to really understand. And I really don't think that you should present an idea before you really understand the other person's idea, right? If you don't understand where they're coming from, what they said, why they said it, then you're not really qualified to be able to speak into where they're at. And this is a huge problem in the Lives Matter debate, is people aren't listening to the why behind those statements, and they're just like, that was the Karen argument. One girl was saying all lives matter, the other was saying Black lives matter, they would say that's all lives. Black lives are all lives. If Black lives matter, then all lives matter. And the other one was like, until Black lives matter, then all lives can't matter. And I'm like, you're both saying the same thing. You're both valuing Black lives. You're both valuing people, but you're yelling at each other. And can I just like take a little rabbit trail right there? That is a political spirit, right? That is like when people agree about the same thing and yet still find a reason to fight instead of come together. Like there's something demonic about that, where because the devil comes to divide people and to get people to fight with one another. And it's amazing how much similar we are and how similar we think, and yet we still find reason to fight about stuff. And we fight about the craziest, stupidest things, right? And by stupid, I mean like we'll fight about like car color and carpet color and what TV show is the best. I mean, we find like the most insane things. And then when it comes to like important topics like racism and like equality and spirituality, these other things, like we have not trained ourselves on how to listen and how to talk to one another, so we practice what we've been practicing. We yell, right? And we're seeing this, like social media created a context for people to be able to be empowered to yell at one another. And now, guess what we're seeing? People are doing it offline. They're yelling in the streets, they're yelling in their homes. I mean, like there's major division. Okay, number 5, listen. Okay, this is gonna like throw you guys for a loop here, and I just like, please listen. And can I just say one more thing? Like if you're tuning in, like please, you owe it to me, watch this whole thing, right? Listen to like the whole of what I'm saying. And then if you want to talk, I want to listen. Here's the problem. To me, evolution is the best case of systemic racism that exists in our society today. And let me explain that. When Charles Darwin submitted his theory, his guesstimate or estimate about how the origin of the species came about, he suggested that we see different people groups, and those groups are different races, and that all those races evolved differently. And he said, again, this is Charles Darwin, this is not me. If you don't believe me, look it up. Charles Darwin said, white Europeans are the most evolved people, and that black people were the least evolved people because they look most similar to gorillas, apes, and monkeys. And then he said that all the different races in between, you can tell how far they've evolved by their skin color. So you could line people up from darkest to lightest and tell who's the most superior. And biblically, we believe that is completely wrong, right? We believe that God created one race, the human race, that we were all born into equality, that Adam and Eve are our grandfather and grandmother, and that all of us are brothers and sisters. We also believe that there's one color, right? Some of us have more of it, some of us have less of it. And remember when science discovered melatonin? And it was like, oh, well, black people are black because they've got more melatonin, and white people are white because they've got less of it. And it kind of reinforced the whole, there's not races, there's one race. It's one color that just has different variants of the same color. And then, remember the Human Genome Project when they finished mapping the DNA sequences of mankind? You know what they found out? It was this report. It never went wide anywhere. Most people didn't hear about it, but they discovered that we all went back to one man and one woman. When they looked at the DNA, they were like, oh, we all go back. And this was funny because people who believed in evolution, that really rocked their world, because they were like, but Darwin said that we came from different streams or races, and how in the world could black people come from the same race as white people? Meanwhile, people that are looking from a biblical worldview are like, well, yeah, do you want me to tell you their names? I can't even tell you their occupation. And so you might say, come on, James, we believe in evolution because it's science, and we don't believe the whole thing about the difference between black and white people. But that has affected our culture. I mean, there are racial slurs that exist because of Darwin's theories. And it still exists. The whole argument, yeah, but the whole difference between black and white and evolution doesn't matter today. It does. As long as you have a system that tells you that some people can evolve to be more superior and other people inferior, you will always have a foundation for racism to build on. And how many times have you heard the phrase, it's survival of the fittest? That shows up everywhere, in the boardroom and in business. It shows up in science, in literally in sociology, everywhere. And I just think evolution is so evil, and it's it puts forward this foundation that these racism thrives on. And I just want to add this little science lesson here for those of you I just believe in science. Science actually tells us recently, most scientists that are in the field of origin of the species, right? Most scientists are not in their specialty is not in the field of what relates specifically to the origin of the species. There are a few fields that are. The fields that are, most scientists in there have come to define evolution as being insufficient, right? Even people that believe in it still have said it's insufficient. Most scientists that are connected to the field say that it just does not work anymore. Specifically in microbiology, microbiologists have said, if Darwin knew what we know now about the cell, he would have never written The Origin of Species, the book that he lays out evolution. And this is why. Darwin thought that the cell was the single most simplest form of life. He thought it was like a Lego, right? There's nothing to break apart when you get down to a single Lego. That's it. There's nothing inside the Lego. And so he thought, okay, you get a Lego, you put a bunch of Legos on a box, you shake the box, you open the lid. Some of them are going to stick together. The ones that can't live die, and the ones that do, you put them in the box, shake it again, and they get better, which that whole process defies one of our modern laws of physics. So that's a whole problem there. But he kept thinking, he kept shaking the box, it keeps getting better. Eventually you get people. Logically, you can see how that makes sense. You're like, well, that kind of makes sense. It seems like shaking enough times, you could build a thing, and then you build enough things. I mean, it would take a giant person to build a person out of the Legos, right? Because you'd have to build a liver, and you'd have to, each of us, we know inside of us, there's all these different systems that all work together. You can do it in Minecraft. You ask your kids about it. They can build computers. They can build all this stuff. It's just it has to be enormous go down to the detail to make it all work. The problem is like the cell is not a Lego, right? Microbiologists who look inside the cell said it's not a Lego. It's actually like an iPhone. There's like, there's hundreds of pieces. I don't have my iPhone. I have an iPad. There's hundreds of pieces that go into this thing, and they all have to go in at the same time, right? You can't like, okay, now I got a screen. Now I can like make that work, and then I can add like a processor. Oh, that's working. Now I can add a motherboard. No, it's like it all has to go in. It all has to go in a certain order. It all has to go in a certain way. And it all has to be there at the same time before you even turn it on. And it's got to have software. Your cells have software, right? There is like the DNA that's written in the cell. And the cell has to have the same software as every other cell. You can't have like one cell and another cell bounce along, click together, and be like, oh, I like you. Let's start working together. It has to be identical, right? And the information for the second cell has to be in the first cell in order for the first cell to even like live with the second cell. It has to know the other cell before it even links together. And like that works on, like, imagine a huge scale. Like evolution would have to like spit out the whole product, the whole human at the end in order for it to work. And it's all of that information, that software, which they have said there's even more data in your cell than in this iPad, right? In fact, they're trying to figure out how to store data in human cells because our bodies hold more data than any of the hard drives we've created. Like, that's a weird sci-fi thing, but like you get the point. Like, it's not Legos, and like microbiologists are like this. It can't work. Most people that are still talking about evolution are taking it a step further, and they're saying, okay, so there's got to be. They call it intelligent design. So people with like a biblical perspective are like, oh yeah, it's really intelligent. Other people are like, we don't know. The guy that's most famous for evolution right now. He said his current theory is it has to be aliens that came and seeded. I mean, seriously, you look it up in the interviews. Like, there has to be another species that seeded the process of evolution and guided it to start through the process in order for us to get where we're at today. And I remember the interview I saw. The guy who interviewed him was Ben Stein. I don't know if you watch him at all. He was always on HBO. But he was like, did you say aliens? Like, it's shocking. No matter where you're at, people are shifting towards whether they believe in God or not. There has to be something that's putting this all together. End of the day, I just want you to know that, like, when people say, I believe in evolution, like, I think we just got to say, like, I don't. I believe that we are one human race, that we are not evolved where some of us are better than others. I think we're all the same. The Bible points out 3 equalities. I put the scriptures on the screen for you. I just don't have time. But we're created equal. Genesis 1, God said, let's make man in our image. Every single person, black, white, yellow, I forget the song in my head, but every color is made in the image of God, right? Adam was one. He had all the information for all the diversity that we see inside of him, right? He had the genetic material to produce black people, white people, albino people, Asian people, Hispanic people, all these different people. It was all in him. So he had to be like in the middle of it so that as he reproduced, that information began to filter down. And then we've got different people groups that begin to look different because of the genetic material. Just like when you breed dogs, like all the dogs go back to 2 dogs on Noah's Ark. But you start breeding dogs and you can create different breeds. I mean, we have a really weird breed in our house. It's a tiny little thing that yells at anything that goes by our front door. And then, like, our neighbor has this enormous dog that, like, every time our little dog, it's like, come on, let's fight. He's just like, whatever. I could take you. Like, it's amazing the diversity you can get between, like, one dog. Okay, you get it. Let me go on. I can't see the screen. We have to seek new friends. I'm almost done. Thank you so much for listening. One of the best things I heard this week was proximity leads to sympathy, leads to unity. Or they said empathy, but sympathy is trying to understand. Empathy is the ability to understand, like you have the same experience. So like when you come near to someone that doesn't act like you, think like you, look like you, you're able to hear their story that builds sympathy. Wow, it breaks my heart to hear your story, what you've gone through, and that's what builds unity together. Let me go back. One of the other great things I heard is like, if you want to build unity, find somebody who doesn't look like you and then go serve somebody else together. Working together builds unity like nothing else. Jesus, this is exactly what Jesus did in the woman at the well, right? Like Samaria was, like Israel was like the size of California. It's a lot smaller, but they had to walk everywhere. So you zoom it out, I think it's probably like roughly the size of California. It was narrow and really long, right? Israel. So whenever people wanted to go north, they would go, instead of going from LA to Sacramento, they would go up through Bakersfield. They would go, because they didn't want to go through Samaria because Jews couldn't stand Samaritans. They would go over to Vegas, up to Idaho, into Oregon, and then down, was it 99 or 84? I'm not a real Californian until I can quote every highway in the state, but they would come down from Crater Lake and into Sacramento, right? It would add 2 whole days to their journey to go all the way around. And so Jesus is like, hey, we're going to Sacramento. And the disciples are like, awesome, road trip. Judas is like, Vegas, yes. And Jesus is like, nope, Bakersfield. And they're like, what? They go to Bakersfield, sits down at the well, and this woman comes up, and Jesus engages in a conversation with her. Her engaging in a conversation broke a racial barrier, and it broke a gender barrier. And you would think that she'd be like, oh, wow, thank you so much. You've come to me. You've initiated a conversation with me. Thank you, thank you, thank you. But no, she was like, she put up 3 resistance moments. Yeah, well, what about this? What about that? And it was Jesus' persistence to bring relationship and reconciliation to this woman that allowed her to finally get, wow, he really loves me. And when Jesus persisted, he won not just her, but he won the whole city. Seek new friends. Turn off news entertainment. And please, for the love of God, turn off Fox, CNN, MSNBC, NBC, CBS, ABC, turn them all off. They do not have a biblical worldview. They're not your friend. They're there to make money. They're creating more problems than they're fixing. Most of the time, they're not even telling you the news. I just oh God, right? Please raise up men and women to tell us a new way to learn about what's going on in the world. Number 1, and this is really important, is you got to be anti-racist. You can't just be non-racist. You when you see it, when you hear it, you got to say it. You got to say, hey, that's racist, right? You're going to pay for this too, because it might be easy to say it to a stranger, but when your friends or your family say it, it's going to be really hard. I've said it, and I'm not like, hey, look at me, but I've said it several times in my life to people that were close to me, and you know what they said every time? No. I don't have anything wrong with those people. I just blah, blah, blah. You're going to get pushback, and it doesn't matter if you change their mind. It matters that you just put it in front of them, right? And you can say it in a loving way, but we need to say it. We need to stand up for it. As a church, we need to stand up for it. And it's our job, right? I'm really grateful for white men like Ray Johnston and Louis Giglio, Craig Groeschel, like these 3 white pastors who gave their power and their platform to other people so that I could hear their story. People like Latasha Washington and Lecrae Monroe, Albert Tate. The interview with T.D. Jakes, like I said, was just so good. I'm going to put it in the link we send out every week where you can access this stuff. It's all free. You don't have to sign up for it. It's just free. You can watch it. It's just conversations that are really going to challenge you. And we've got to do it, right? There's been studies that say Diversity happens at the elasticity of the whites in the conversation, right? When white people freeze up and say that's far enough, the conversation stops. And I just think, like, if you're white, you've got to be willing to talk, to listen, to have a conversation. We've got to engage and allow people the platform to be heard. You don't have to agree with it. You don't have to. You don't have to create a space where you're not offended by it, but listen. And like I'm just begging you, like, go to God with it. He's the one that points out the problems in my life that I can't see, and we all need to do that. And I'm just going to leave you with this last verse. Whoever claims to love God yet hates his brother or sister is a liar. And then this is like the really challenging part. For whoever does not love their brother and sister whom they have seen cannot love God whom they haven't seen. Like if we're struggling so much to love the person in front of us, and it's like maybe for you, it's not the person who doesn't look like you. Maybe it's the person who doesn't think like you. Maybe it's the person that's in the autonomous zone that's yelling things that you don't agree with. Like, until we can love that person, we're disqualifying ourselves from being able to love God. Like we have to be able to look at people and see the image of God in them. And if they don't know Christ, our goal is to call them into a relationship with Jesus, right? Not, hey, you need to think like I think. And I think that listening can be our most powerful weapon. I want to thank you for listening. If you're watching, I want to thank you for giving of your time. Again, if you joined in, please go back, watch the whole thing. I know that, what was it? Andy Stanley said, it'd be a shame to go through this pain and not gain anything, right? Like, I just feel like we're so close, and one of the most important things we can do is not allow the conversation to change, right? And we see that. We see our culture, like, it's trending towards other areas, you know, like the rioting. I feel it's like it's pulling a conversation the other way. I think it's got to be about equality, and I know that God's really changed my heart in a good way the last couple of weeks, and I would just encourage you, give God the space to be able to do that in your heart. Would you stand? I'm going to call the worship team up, but they prepared a song, and I don't want to rip them off of all the time they spent studying that. And as they're coming, I just want to encourage you to continue to worship God through giving. It's just so important for your spiritual health to do that. And you can do that online. You can text an amount to 84321. There's a giving box in the back. You can drop that off in, and that's one of the key areas, right? It's the love of money. It's greed that can really keep us from encountering God. So while you're doing that, just join us in singing this last song.
Stories of what they think you're like, but I've heard the tender whisper of love in the dead of night, and you tell me that you're pleased and that I'm never alone. You're a good Father. It's who you are. It's who you are. It's who you are, and I'm loved by you. It's who I am. It's who I am. It's who I am. And who I am. You are perfect in all of your ways. You are perfect in all of your ways. You are perfect in all of your ways to us. You are perfect in all of your ways. You are perfect in all of your ways. You are perfect in all of your ways to us. And love so undeniable, I can hardly speak. Peace so unexplainable, I can hardly think as you call me. Deeper still as you call me. Deeper still as you call me. Deeper still into love. Love, love, you're a good, good Father. It's who you are. It's who you are. It's who you are. And I'm loved by you. It's who I am. It's who I am. It's who I am. You're perfect. You are perfect in all of your ways. You are perfect in all of your ways. You are perfect in all of your ways to us. You are perfect in all of your ways. You are perfect in all of your ways. You are perfect in all of your ways to us. Good Father. 'Cause you're a good, good Father. It's who you are. It's who you are. It's who you are. And I'm loved by you. It's who I am. It's who I am. It's who I am.
Say thank you for staying and listening. It's a hard conversation. I tried my best to get it as short as I could, so thank you. Second of all, don't linger in the building. If you want to talk, please go outside in the sunshine and do that. And three, if you want a chocolate bar, hit the sanitizer first, then go grab a bar. And remember, fathers and mothers, you can both grab one. So happy Father's Day, everyone. Have a great Sunday.